All right, guys. Sorry about that. I apologize. Got a little lost in my emails. All right. Doing good. Sorry about that, guys. I got a little lost in my emails and I saw it was like 8:01, so apologize for being a few minutes late. Grabbing my book. Get rid of that. Okay. All right, period 3, page 68. Let's get on this. I'm going to go back real quickly to the, sorry about this, to the Google Doc review, which I posted a link to as well. Just going into this. So period 3, kind of reviewing, just kind of looking over this. Got the French Indian War and Tolerant Acts. I mean, these are all the steps towards the American Revolution. And we also review the phase of the American government. So we got the Albany Plan. Gosh, man, a lot of stuff is I have to review myself. Obviously, the Continental Congresses that played a major role in the creation of the Constitution. Going back to Albany Plan, I just got my brain kind of gone there. That was actually, I think, during the 7 Years' War. I think that was their kind of first attempt to like form a self-government, kind of organize themselves more militarily to support the British against the French. Remember that the George Washington starts off as a British lieutenant, I believe it is, that actually starts the 7 Years' War at certain levels by attacking some French forts in what is, I think, Ohio and the Ohio Valley area, which we know is so important to agriculture and stuff later, and also access to waterways in the Mississippi. So we get the Argos Confederation, which was failed. Remember, that was largely created out of a cause of the American Revolution. Then we get the Constitution Convention. We get our first Federalist. Then we get, looks like, Washington's actual presidency. So period 3, where are we going from? Basically, the French and Indian War, why the French and Indian War actually happened, and the Proclamation Line of 1763 and all that stuff, to the Intolerable Acts, to the American Revolution, to our governments during the American Revolution and after, the failure of the Articles of Confederation, the creation of our Constitution, and our early political parties, and the presidency of George Washington. So that's what we're reviewing. That's what period 3 is all about. Once again, I guess I will go through this book kind of chapter by chapter. So we're on period 3 and page 69. Imperial Wars, and immediately goes right into the 7 Years' War. They kind of talk about that this was a bunch of other wars, and if you learned in European history, they actually just have the War of Jenkins' Ears in this as well. There's all these funky wars that happen in Europe at the same time. Remember that we're under colonial rule at this time, and it's more of a reflection of European politics and us having our own politics. So we got that. And then kind of moving forward, we get all these acts, like the Sugar Act, the Corrigan Act, the Stamp Act, Declaratory Act, the Townsend, or what we call the Intolerable Acts, or get more political than economic. It knows that the All-Star is economic to make money for the French and Indian War. Then the Boston Massacre. Oh, sorry. There's the Townsend Acts, but then we get to the Intolerable Acts, or the Coercive Acts. My apologies. And there's your 4. Again, looking at the Intolerable Acts, which is on page 75, how the Intolerable Acts really are more, and the Coercive Acts are more of controlling Boston too. Remember, all this stuff is happening in Boston. The Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre, the first shots, I think Boston, Paul Revere's from Boston or something like that. He's running around during the early parts of the American Revolution. So a lot of the stuff is centered in Boston geographically. So you get those acts, and obviously that is leading up to the revolution. We kind of talked about a little bit last time. So that ends on page 84. So I think I'm just going to take some questions on what you guys need to know on 69 to 84. Kind of get a little bit more specific about what are some of your questions, and then we'll get there. So if you guys have questions on page 69 to 84, that little review that I just did. Once again, what is this focusing on? Basically the French and Indian War, how that caused these acts to be happening, which started with economic acts, basically to make money off of or to pay for the war, the French Indian War, and how that payment led to people being frustrated because nobody wants to pay taxes. We all know that. And then after the taxes go down, how they, as in the British royal authorities, both back in Britain and in the United States, began placing heavy and heavier political restrictions. Remember, we always talked about, you don't piss off your banker or a lawyer, right? Those are two people probably shouldn't piss off. And with the Stamp Act, they really marginalized, they, again, being the British Empire, the Parliament. A lot of times King George III is often seen as at the hands of Parliament. Remember, they're like similar to us, not just one person owns the government. They have to work with this group called Parliament. But how those political restrictions ultimately led to the American Revolution. All right. So, yeah, I kind of answered yours a little bit more. What are some of the causes and the effects of the 7 Years' War? The causes, so going to Hillary's, getting a little more specific about this stuff. The causes, I think we could say this is a European fight. This really has to do with France and Britain hating each other and using the Americans and the Indians as little pawns in their game, as we will use pawns later. So I don't know necessarily if we talk about some of the direct causes. Obviously, we can talk about the beginning of war. There's the Albany Plan, that was in there. But really, what is this? This is the fact that we have, at this time, what George Washington is told and provoked as a British citizen to go and pick a fight with a fort. And why do they want to pick a fight with this fort? I don't know, because a bunch of French people there. They know the French. So again, I really see the French Indian War as a outcome of the colonial rivalry and the mercantilist rivalry between Great Britain and France. If you know anything about European history, Great Britain and France are often always at war with another. Now, let's talk about the colonist view. The colonist view at this time, hey, the Ohio River Valley, it has access to land. That's super, super important. One thing that's going to come out the French Indian War, it's the proclamation line of 1763 that I'm talking about right now. What happens after that is just to limit individuals from going westward to provoke these fights. Going back to Malad's question on Thursday, I believe it was, one thing that the Bacon's Rebellion is really about the indentured servants coming out and then them getting their freedom and them looking for land, and they're going, geez, all the land's been taken here by these old John Rolfes, and the grandchildren of John Rolfes now are owning up all these estates. We got this guy called Thomas Jefferson that owns these huge plantations of Virginia, where it's not him but his family. Where the heck are we going to be able to get all this wealth and prestige and power? And the only way to go, like we kind of talked about today with expanding the role of the empire, is to move west, man. That's like part of the American story. And like I told you guys today, I think we're still mystified about it. You want to go make yourself something, you go to sunny California and you get a chance to be a star in Hollywood and become a rock star, a rap star, because that's where it happens in LA. We even got LeBron James now, right? So we can see from the colonist point of view that, the Ohio River Valley is probably known to be rich in natural resources. Once again, it's going to be strategic and important as we command waterways, and we're using those waterways to access the Mississippi. And we know that the most important way that we can trade goods is through water. So, there's a couple colonist views, but really, Hillary, I think I would say that the causes most directly are a European rivalry. This really comes at a fight in Europe, and then we just happen to be one of the many battles, right? Over there, I think this is a War of Austrian Succession at this time, or the War of Jenkins' Ear, or whatever, but we call it the French and Indian War over here because that's the part that we're fighting over here. The effects, I'm not going to go into that because really those are specific questions, but the effects are, if you were largely to put this on an LAQ, is that because of British protection of the colony, especially from the attack of the French and the Indians, they're going to ask the colonists to pay some money. And that money is going to cause them to increase taxes on their colonies, because we know that, according to our last review session, that mercantilism is designed in one way, to help the colonies, to help the mother country at the expense, and at the cost of the colonies. The colonies are to provide the taxes. They're to provide the raw resources. They're supposed to get the short end of the deal when they traded things and got things that were more expensive, although traded out things that were least expensive. So ultimately, Hillary, we will have all of these new laws like the Sugar Act, and the Stamp Act. And I mean, the Sugar Act, well, most importantly, was just to collect revenue. Later, as people get frustrated about the increasing prices and probably beginning understanding and seeing these economic problems and looking over and saying, why is this, why are these British people treating us Americans differently? And we begin developing an independence of like thought and identity. Ultimately, this is going to lead to things like the Stamp Act and the Coercive Acts, where it's now a surrender of not our economic rights, but more of our political rights, right? The Stamp Act is basically ensuring that anything that's published has to get paid. You have to pay more money. The Coercive Acts are basically ending what we call the little independence that the colonists had underneath the British system, right? I mean, basically Boston, the mayor, the judges, everybody gets kicked out, and basically British royal authorities come in to rule the place with the direct authority of Parliament and King George, right, back over in Great Britain. So those will be the effects, that the French and Indian War is going to lead to economic problems on the British side, and they're going to have to say, well, we have to pay for your protection somehow. All these British soldiers and all this Navy that costs to get them all the way from Great Britain and supply them with food costs money. It's not for free, and you have to pay your taxes, and then the taxes will increase and people get angry, and then they're going to say, well, stop being angry, so they're going to reduce their political rights, and then you got the seeds of an American Revolution. So again, a lot of historians would say that the 7 Years' War caused political and economic problems between the colonists and the British, which would ultimately create the American Revolution. So you can say it was a huge effect, was the American Revolution, and that's fine for independence. So I think I went through cause and effect, sorry. I do Proclamation Line in 1763, I think check, right? After the French and Indian War, the British don't want to deal with any of these more problems, so they put up a line basically on the Appalachians. It's physically hard to get across the line of Appalachians anyway, like similar like we talked about the other day with Jeb and the Sierra Nevadas. The Appalachians are really gnarly, right? I mean, sometimes it snows on top of them, but the fact that even the snow, it's just hard to maneuver things around there. That's why those waterways in the Ohio River Valley, and then later just blowing the crap out of them and getting a railroad to transport goods will become even better. But that's why that Ohio River Valley becomes so important, because it's a way to transport goods to the Mississippi. It's too difficult to get to New York. And unfortunately, taking a boat that, basically flows down the river and then sails up an ocean is a lot faster than trying to get that on land. And probably the cost that you have to deal with land, right? The animals, the people that need to protect it away from people that are going to plunder it. You've got loose Indians out there and stuff like that. Not to be like super like racist about Indians. By the way, up in this area, you have the Navajo. the Iroquois Confederacy, which is like 7 or 8 tribes all coming together and working peacefully with one another to say these guys were just quote unquote savages attacking supply trains. Would be definitely what we call a hyperbole, or in AP lang we call a gross exaggeration. All right, so Proclamation Line of 1763, check. What was the Boston Massacre? In Boston, a bunch of people began rioting. They actually seemed provoked. The history kind of shows that they were actually the provokers, as most rioters are, right? They're the ones throwing rocks first before somebody else shoots, right? But whoever gets caught, this person gets shoot. That's why you don't start a fight. So what was the Boston Massacre? These are, a bunch of colonists that came in, and they were frustrated about the increasing taxes. Some kind of, probably a little bit of a protest stood up, and ultimately British officials will fire upon them, killing, I believe, 2 people, maybe 3, maybe 6 or 7. I know it wasn't more than 10 for sure. I know one was a free African American, right? I think it's Atticus Finch, I think it was his name. Or am I thinking of To Kill a Mockingbird? Because there's a Finch there. Sorry, all over the place on that one. But you don't need to know the details. But one there's many people that die. I believe I want to say it's Paul Revere wrote this, right? Yeah, he painted it, right? So Paul Revere paints this painting, and it's titled The Boston Massacre, right? And some people would say it's not much of a massacre, but other individuals would say it definitely was. But it was basically now that the British have taken a step. Sorry, I'm reading kind of things at the same time. But now that the British have taken now a violent step to put down protesters, right? And so that's a Boston Massacre. Why were Europeans implementing acts? Well, it's not Europeans. So going to Hillary, these are British, right? And their first justification would be, I think the easiest justification at this time would be like, whoa, you guys cost money, so we're going to do that. I think a massive reason is it goes back to mercantilism, right? This unequal relationship that needs to be said, and the colonies live at the expense of the mother country. So of course it's easy to tax us. Of course we're going to tax when your goods, because those goods are coming to us, and if we did it, it'd be free trade. We wouldn't be making any money off of you guys. So I think there's a two-part answer to your question, Hillary. One is, and I don't know, you have to differentiate the Sugar Act from the Stamp Act, right? And the Quartering Act. I mean, the Quartering Act just says, guess what? Colonists can't stop soldiers from coming into your home. So when you say the word etc., I really think that there are two different acts happening. One is economic and one are political, right? One is basically to get taxes and revenues for the costs of sending an entire army across the ocean to take care of the French Indian War. But the second is a political maneuver to put these colonists back a little under control, because they're acting a little too independent. They're acting a little too rioty with the Boston Massacre and Boston Tea Party. We got to cinch this thing down. We can't just have these people screaming and yelling all the time and saying, burning British flags and trying to kick people out. Okay. Mina wants to go back to, or go to 4 to 76, 77. Yeah, we kind of talked about this with Precious if she was here. We kind of talked about the idea of that the American Revolution is going to call into question the idea of kings and dynasties, and really the divine right. As we know, the Enlightenment was a bunch of scientists taking scientific ideas but applying them to society, applying it to man, and applying it to what we call sociology is being developed. My understanding, my discipline called social science is happening. They're trying to understand history a little bit more and stuff like that. And not to say they didn't keep records of this, but they began understanding that this isn't just a God-designed world, that his hand is literally, look how big my hand is, literally on top of that world. So when we talk about Enlightenment ideas, what I would say before I even read this is that it's really a focus on taking, again, scientific ideals, putting them into man. Again, we'll see this in the social contract theories. One will be John Locke, and actually Thomas Hobbes has one, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. These are all Enlightenment thinkers. What does Hobbes say? That we're selfish and cruel, and Adam Smith will take that later and say, well, if we're selfish and cruel and competitive, let's use that to our advantage, create something called capitalism. Let's not have the government interfere, because the government's biased towards one group or another. But if we just let human nature kind of take its part, we'll notice that that will be more competitive with one another, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? And that thus creating what we have as kind of our capitalist system of relating businesses, whether it be healthcare, whether it be pharmaceuticals, as I've talked about in class, whether it be banks, as I've talked in class, or whether it be the iPhone market or anybody else, compete with one another. So again, you're saying you might be losing me, but I'm trying to get you guys to understand that, Adam Smith understands, they're all trying to understand human nature, and that's what they're doing. They're creating economics of it. Remember, economics, in my opinion, is really like a psychological state of mind. When everybody feels like things are good, everything's good. And then if not, we go into these things called panics and depressions and recessions, and all these issues start popping up, right? And consumer confidence goes down, and anxiety goes up, right? These are all like really, and these are all words that economists use to talk about our economy. So going back over here, if there are natural laws, and if you would really stress the word when we talk about the alignment, the word natural laws, I think you'd be understand where we're going. But if there are natural laws that control science, why aren't there natural laws that control government, that control how men treat each other? And they began saying that, like Adam Smith had the idea of competition, obviously Thomas Hobbes will say we're selfish and cruel. That's why we have Locke. So we need government there, and it's a contract between the people and the government to feel protected. And once that government is no longer protecting its people, the people, he doesn't say, actually explain what the hell is going to go on. He just says that's what's going on, according to what I've read, and I haven't read really actually too much. Go back to John Locke, which, we know a little bit more, who is an Enlightenment thinker. He's going to say that there are three basically natural rights that are given to us by God. They are natural. They happen. Each person on this earth gets these things, and it's going to be life, liberty, and property. Right. You can hear the words inside of our Declaration of Independence. If you don't know that, at the very beginning, Thomas Jefferson says the reason why we're rebelling from Great Britain is because our Creator has given mankind three inalienable rights, and these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right. Those are his three. And so you can see directly the influence of Enlightenment thought and social contract theory into our American Revolution, into the document that is declaring that we are no longer going to be a part of this British Empire. So you got that, Jean-Jacques Rousseau with his love of what we call general will, which I've always interpreted as what we call a majority democracy, which means, if you're part of the 49%, you feel like you lose, but if you're part of the 51%, you feel like a winner, right? That's kind of the cruelness of what we call democracy, right? It's not everybody's always going to be happy with the result that happens. So, so he comes up with social contract theory, the general will. He's also, his influence is more on the French too, and then their treatment of the Native Americans, but that really doesn't have to do directly with the American Revolution. But, all three of these guys are talking about social contract theory, and all of them are guessing at what natural rights and laws do governments have to control us, and what natural rights and laws do we have to make sure the government doesn't control us too much. And finding that appropriate balance is critical. And, we're going to see that fail in the Articles of Confederation, which individual and state rights just don't work, right? And so we're going to have to increase the role of the government, and we're going to do that through the thing called the Constitution, But then the people are going to say, well, don't get too much. And we're like, it's right. We got this other document called the Bill of Rights. Here's 10 things that we can't do so that this kind of contract is equal, rather than be way too heavy on the government or way too individual and state rights. We're going to try to get that equilibrium just right. We've been playing with that equilibrium ever since. So that's why they keep on talking about this thing being kind of a great experiment, right? So I think, Mina, we went deep into it. The Albany Plan of Union, I know I didn't read page 76 and 77, but I think I probably explained that a lot better than what's going on. So going back to the Albany Plan, again, every time you guys do this, if you give me an exact page number, it'd be great. Page 70 for all you guys. Again, I think I talked about this before. The Albany Plan was really an idea of how to defend themselves against the French and Indians. These are colonists basically come together. They're theoretically raising arms. They're raising military. All these things cost money because farmers and surveyors like George Washington and barkeepers and shopkeepers are being forced to leave their farms and leave their shops and leave their liquor stores and being forced to go fight, correct? So, that stuff costs money, right? And obviously your economy is taking a little bit of a hit because your men's going out. We're not at the time, in my opinion, where we have industrial machines creating factory jobs where warfare is a little bit more profitable. Right now, man, like you have war, everybody leaves the farm, and now you're not making food. And if you're not making food, we got some problems for the next couple of years. And mind you, like the next couple of months, right? Because, if you're a lot of us take for granted our food, milk and carrots. So I'm telling you guys, like I'm trying to grow stuff in my backyard. It just takes a while. Anyway, it's not going on a super long tangent, but just going back to the Albany Plan. What was the idea of this? Well, all this stuff is going to cost money. So we need to collect taxes. And so this is a way that the individual colonies were trying to come together and kind of work together for mutual defense, work on raising a military together. And if we're going to come to mutual defense and military, we're going to have to pay for it. We're going to see this actually with multiple organizations later that we're part of, from the UN to NATO, right? Donald Trump called out a lot of NATO allies and said, look, we're paying our 3% that we're supposed to, but nobody else is. So if you aren't paying, why should we have to pay for mutual defense? And in certain levels, the guy has a valid point, and it's really for the defense of Europeans so that they don't get attacked by Russian. So that's what the Albany Plan is. It's a loose set. Now, are they coming together to do representatives? No. Are they forming a actual government that has certain currency? Absolutely not. Have they created an independent Supreme Court with a presidency? No. These guys are just coming together and they're going, look, we got a bunch of French and Indians. We got the British over here helping us out. How can we help the British? How can we help ourselves? We probably need to raise an army. with that army, it's going to cost some money. So we should probably collect some taxes instead of being like always listening to these royal authorities about what to do. We can have a couple of George Washingtons go out there and go have some fun and defend us from all these French and Indians that may come and attack us here on the East Coast. We don't want that happening. So it's a loose organization based off of military purposes with some kind of economic issues of taxes, but really doesn't have any strong political foundation of forming a cohesive government. All right. What were the Caraccises and how are they from the acts that control the colonies? They all control the colonies. So this is Yasmin's question. So we're going over to page 75. Really easy. You know, if you look at all these, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, for the most part, it's to punish Boston. So if you want to say how it's a little bit different, a lot of these coercive acts really are charging Boston. Why Boston? Again, some seems to be the center. You know, Philadelphia later seem to be a center, right? New York City, Los Angeles today seem to be a center of issues, right? Of things that happen. So actually Chicago now, right? Chicago has seems like there's always something coming out of Chicago nowadays. So anyways, there are 4 coercive acts. Number 1, the Port Act closed the port of Boston, prohibited trade until prohibited trade in and out of the harbor until the destroyed tea was paid for. What destroyed tea are you talking about? The Boston Tea Party, in which colonists dressed up like Native Americans, really asserting their American identity, as many historians say, and grabbing the tea and throwing it overboard. Number 2, the Massachusetts government reduced the power of the Massachusetts legislature while increasing the power of the royal governor. What's a legislator? What we call that? We call that like the Congress, but at the state level or at this colonist level. So guess what? The representatives, bye-bye, and they say bye-bye? Just reduced, brought down the power of them. However, the power of the royal governor, who talks directly back to the king and parliament back in England, he got more power. So again, political power local, down. Political power in the hands of the king and parliament and the British, way up. Again, so these are political. The Administration Justice Act allowed royal officials accused of crimes tried in Great Britain and colonies. So let's say I feel that as a royal policeman, you did something illegal. You're not going to be tried here in court. We're going to ship you back to Great Britain. And when you're back in Great Britain, you're going to be charged by the British, who most likely will say, not guilty, you're good to go, and go back home. And then a 4th, they'll expand the Quartering Act to enable British troops to be quartered in private homes and apply to all colonies. And quartering means going to sleep or providing shelter. I guess, the court or something is to provide shelter. So troops were able to basically knock down the door of any house and say, hey, I need to use your bed, and also all that food. I need to have that food because I am here for you to protect you. So again, these are the coercive acts. That's why they're called intolerable acts. So these series of acts are just that really attack mainly Boston, but then affect the entire colonies and really, really are just political. So again, how are they different? They're a lot different than the Sugar Act and the Tea Act, which is a direct, basically excise tax. That means a tax on a good. They're very similar to the Stamp Act and the Quartering Act before, because it's the exact same word. And the Stamp Act was kind of a limit of free speech, right? So you can see a lot of these too. In a couple of cases, this is actually a response to the Boston Tea Party. So that's a little bit different, rather than just a response to the French and Indian War, right? The coercive acts were directly, the fact that says, hey, we're not going to open this port up and you guys are going to make money. You guys aren't going to make money. This whole town's going to lose money unless you pay back the tea that you guys all threw over the port in some drunken experience. So, because there's a couple people hammered there. Those Americans love to drink. And it's probably safer for them to drink too. Water had to be always cleaned and good, right? Beer was naturally cleared, right? It has like enzymes in there that kill the bacteria. All right, let's get away from Americans being alcoholics. All right, what were the coercive acts? Are they different? How did Lyman ideals contribute to Americans pushing away Great Britain and then becoming more independent? I don't know, Hillary, I think I just nailed that. Right? They talked about the social contract, right? Let's think about it. Is the Declaratory Act, is the coercive acts, is any of these Stamp Acts, are they a violation of natural law? Most definitely, John Locke would say this is definitely against their life, definitely against their liberty, freedom, and definitely against their property, as you have to quarter them. So I think I kind of nailed that earlier when I was talking to Mina about the Enlightenment ideals. All right, we're at 30 minutes, so we got to move on. This has multiple ports. So now we're on to the American Revolution. What do you need to know? The causes and the effects. What were the causes? I think we just talked about it. All of these acts in the 7 Years' War, So I guess really what you want to talk about is focus on the effects. So I am moving past all this stuff. One thing I would want to know is the Declaration of Independence, page 88. I would want to make sure that I understood that how that linked to the Enlightenment. I just talked about the inalienable rights thing, that all people are given by our Creator. I don't know. Look it up. Look up Google Declaration of Independence. Like the first two sentences, it's like the law, word for word. All I does is twist the word pursuit. Twist the word property and pursuit of happiness, and then they both begin with P. What do you know? I'm really focused on page 91, basically, the Articles of Confederation, right? And really how, I'd go to page 93, and on page 93, there's three, right, things, right? Number one, what are the problems? Financial. Guess what? They don't have anything. They don't have a treasury. They lost all their money because of the war. Foreign. The Europeans aren't trading with them. They're isolating them. It's hard to be an independent country when the whole world shows in mercantilism and everybody has to depend on themselves and everybody's paying on protective tariffs and protective trade because that's what mercantilism at that time, and you're just a brand new country. Of course, nobody's going to trade with you, and of course, you're therefore going to lose a lot of money. And that goes back to number one, financial again. And then domestic, talking about kind of all these different issues. So, and they talk about not having enough money for, for this Shays Rebellion, in which they actually fight because they're not getting paid. Right, and they actually have soldiers killing soldiers because one group of soldiers haven't got paid for the American Revolution. Okay, so anyways, well, not the American Revolution, but I think they're going in debt. There it is. So hide state taxes, imprisonment for debt, and lack of paper money. Remember, look at this, and then they're led by a farm. They're a bunch of farmers led by the Revolutionary War veteran. Told you, poor farmers, what do they want? Free and easy credit. Make things easier. Paper money, let's just print it. We don't need any debt. And guess what? Don't take my money. Don't take my taxes. So there's the Articles of Confederation, and then most importantly, we'll revoke the Constitution. So really, when I look at this next part, I know it's a lot, but I really don't even care about the American Revolution. I really think the most important part is the Articles of Confederation, page 91. And I think on my review document, I say exactly that. And so some of you guys are going, well, why do we have to look at all this stuff? You have to kind of understand the history, kind of as a big picture to understand the small parts. But right now, we're reviewing what needs to be on the test. So anyways, going back, got the Almaine Plan, the Continental Congress, the Articles of Confederation, Constitution. You might ask what the Continental Congress is. Those met during the American Revolution. All right, those are they would draft the Continental armies, right? So the Continental armies were the armies of the United States against the British with the help of the French in the last couple of moments that swings the tide. Sounds like World War I, but reverse. Huh. All right. So Coercive Acts, Enlightenment. Why did natives support the British during the Revolutionary War? I don't know, since they got attacked, right, by them. There weren't any. I don't know. If I was an American Indian, I were betting money on who would win. The biggest navy and most disciplined army with the largest tax base in the world versus the colonists that formerly owned them, that are dying of starvation and out of supplies and are poorly trained and run around at the first sight. I would have bet money on the British. And I think the natives would say, the reason why I'm betting money on the British, the reason I'm going to support the British is that if they win, maybe they'll keep those crazy colonists away from keep on invading our lands and taking stuff. And secondly, maybe they can actually work with us like we did in the French. Maybe we can keep some territory before these guys take it out. Those colonists, on their hand, they don't see any end in sight in grabbing and eating more and more land and moving further and further west. So there's my 30-second moment for you. What are the problems in drafting the Constitution? What we call the Great Compromise, right? It was a fight between big states and small states. So obviously we're going to come to a Congress, and that Congress is going to have two houses. There's going to be an upper house. They're there for 6 years. A lower house, they're there for only 2, right? This is supposed to be where all the crazy people come in and out. called the House of Representatives. Remember, I've talked to different representatives. That one girl from Brooklyn, she's a House of Representative member. A lot of Republicans think she's out of her mind, crazy socialist left, because that's where all this stuff happens. In the upper house, which is this 6-year one, you get to go there a little bit. You get there 6 years, not 2 years down here, but you get to hang out 6 years. It's called the Senate, right? And what's this one done? It's done by population, and then the Senate, you're going to get 2 per state. Ultimately, this great compromise thing is going to have a massive issue because of the slavery, right? You're going to start trying to move people based off of certain ideas. And we still try to move people not based off of slavery, but based off of parties, right? Who's going to win this state and get all the electoral votes, and who's going to win that state and get all those electoral votes. Is it based by population? Yes. But it's also, do they get a couple of other ones? Yes. Right. I mean, it's important we're in Texas and California because there were so many votes, but guess what? Other states like Ohio and everything are worth a lot of points too, because everybody gets at least 2 representatives through the Senate. So all these kind of this great compromise, but what is the issues about the Constitution? It's basically one freaking issue. How strong do we make this central government? We're going to have the Federalists say this: we want it as strong as possible to check those states and get us together. We got to work together in order to be successful. Then you're going to have a bunch of anti-federalists go, no. The way to democracy is having a government that does the least possible, and us states and us people at our level will figure it out. We've already been up to like a dictatorship called the Kings and Queens of England. We don't need it, or basically only kings, but the Kings of England, we don't need to deal with that anymore. So that's basically, the problems. You kind of have to give me a more specific question, Yasmin, if you want it. Hamilton's plan, Crash Course does a really good thing on this, but it's really looking at the, I don't know if there's like actually a section in here that says Hamilton's plan. If there is, it'd be really cool that we would have put in there. Oh, Hamilton's financial program. So there we go, page 110. I mean, I see 3 bullets in the middle. There we go. Number 1, pay off the national debt. And all the war debts of the states, the national debt, they'll take. He probably told Jefferson this, because Jefferson's leading the anti-federalists at this time. He probably said Jefferson's this: look, here's the deal, man. If I take a bank, I'll hook you up by taking out all of your debt. You guys can have free balance. We'll run this thing in debt, but I have to have a bank. That bank has to collect taxes and has to work for us. It just has to work for the central government. And I think Hamilton would have been okay with that, because he would assume that later on we would have been financially successful. I mean, this kind of sounds like Keynesian economics if you understand it, right? We'll be so successful that that power will be more important than the little debt and costs that we have right now. So, I'm looking at 1 and 3 and how they probably went together. He probably went to all the anti-federalists and go, look, I understand you guys want state rights, but you guys are all in freaking debt. If we don't create a national bank, and I know that's a federalist idea, and it gives more power to perhaps the central government, since this bank will control all the United States rather than having individual state banks, but I'll take care of your guys' debt. So vote for it, and you get to have debt. You don't vote for the national bank, and guess what? Your guys going to be in debt, and you got some problems. So kind of an interesting, again, politics, still the same, man. It's all about compromising and making deals and all that stuff. Number 2, protect the young nation's infant industries and collect adequate revenues at the same time by imposing high tariffs on imported goods. How do you protect those? You put in high tariffs to make sure people buy their stuff. Also, maybe you take some of that money and give it directly to some of those businesses that are going to do well, like China does. Right? China is kind of a mercantilist power. They're definitely not a capitalist power, right? There's only one government. You don't get to choose. It's called the Communist Party, and they make decisions on everything else. And so if you go up the Chinese ranks and you were a great businessman, I guarantee the Chinese government goes, you're a good businessman. Here's all this money. I think we do the same thing. We hooked up JP Morgan Chase, Andrew Carnegie, and all these other countries with money to help them get going, or tax breaks or subsidies or land grants, all this free stuff that later is going to be worth billions of dollars. So those are 3 things. Number 1, pay off the debt, especially the state debt. Number 2, protect the young nation infant industries using mercantilism. Hey, everybody else is doing it. All of Europe's doing it. They're ignoring us. Why can't we do the same thing? You want some of our tobacco, Britain, that you've been loving for a long time? Sweet. That's awesome. Well, we got a high tariff to go over there. So guess what? You ain't going to get it. And we can do a trade war back and forth until we can compromise on tariffs. And number 3, create a national bank that can go in and take care of that. All right. There's no more questions. We're at 40 minutes. Sweet. Want you to know, page 111, Proclamation of Neutrality. Boom. Haven't done that in about 4 periods. I forgot what it felt like. All right. Whiskey Rebellion. That's always cool. And you see your George Washington leading a freaking cavalry of farmers that can't pay taxes and are pissed off that they have to pay more taxes of whiskey. And this is where we go. Who's going to win, state rights or the national government? And George Washington comes flying on a white horse, ready to go kill some farmers if they don't pay their damn taxes. I think the federal government won in that case. Federalists versus anti-federalists. What do you want me to say over? Federalists want to increase the power. It's going to be Hamilton. It's going to be Washington. Anti-federalists are going to be people like him, Jefferson. Remember James Madison at first is a Federalist. He writes the Federalist Papers and later probably believes, well, the Federalists got too much power, so switches to anti-federalists. I don't know if you're looking for books. I don't know if you're looking ideas. I need a little bit better question on that one, Ibs. Hendrine, how did we pay off the debt with taxes? I don't know. I don't think we ever did. Yeah, I mean, eventually through taxes, right? I mean, eventually that's how it's going to come down, right? We put a whiskey tax on, right? So I don't know, this is kind of like, it's kind of unfortunately like our ASB budget. You inherit debt and you take it on and then you figure out ways to pay it off later. And that might go 4 or 5 years later in multiple ways, right? It might be through a dance. It might be through more ASB cards. It might be through a fundraiser. It might be through a snap raise. There could be multiple reasons. So saying, how do we pay off the debt? Yeah, ultimately with taxes. How we're going to pay off this debt that we have, I told you, well, ultimately taxes. Somebody's going to have to pay. Can't keep on not paying. So there's that one. What are the Alien Sedition Acts? Those were created basically during the War of 1812, I believe. No, it can't be. What war is happening at that time? There's no page number on Alien Sedition Acts. I mean, I know what they are. One was the Alien, and that was basically to get rid of the, I believe they're voting mostly for the anti-federalists, not the federalists. Yeah, because the Federalists were in power. So the aliens basically changed the citizenship to longer so that people couldn't vote. These immigrants couldn't vote. And that kind of reduced the power of the anti-federalists. The Sedition Acts was to say anything bad about the government at that time. But if I had a page number on the Alien and Sedition Acts, I could go correctly to you guys. But I believe it was during like the war. I don't know. I'm not seeing it. There's Federalist, Anti-Federalist. There's George Washington. There's John Adams. Peaceful Revolution. Political parties, Uber. If you have page 113, on page 115, it says this, the difference between the parties. The Federalists are strongest in the northeastern state and advocate for the growth of federal power. The Democratic Republicans are strongest in the southern states and on the western frontier and argued for states' rights. By 1796, the two major political parties were already taking shape and becoming better organized. In that year, President Washington intended to retire to private life at the end of his second term. All right. What were the Alien Sedition Acts? All right, here we go. We'll try to find this now. So I'm going to since nobody's giving me a page number, I'll waste my time. But in 15 minutes, I'm done. So I'm going back to something called the index. And it says Alien Acts were at 117 and 135. And I'm at 115, so let's go to 117. 117. Oh, there it is. Alien Sedition Acts. Anger against France, strengthen the Federalists. This is when, this is way past like the French Revolution and where it's moving into Napoleon. And Napoleon's starting to look a little whacked out there. It's got to be. And there's the XYZ affair, yeah. That is just during the French Revolution, right? When when basically we send diplomats over there, but the French diplomats X, Y, and Z say, before we talk, you need to give us millions of dollars. As was probably done during that day. Like, you want to talk, pay me off. And then that became like on the newspapers, and everybody got pissed off that we weren't being taken seriously. That this little country, brand new out of the revolution, wasn't being taken seriously. And so we passed the Alien Sedition Act. So most immigrants voted Democrat Republican, which would later become anti-federalist. So they passed the Naturalization Act, and they increased it from 5 to 14 years for them to be citizens and therefore get the right to vote. And they also could deport you if you thought you were an enemy. And most seriously, they passed the Sedition Act, which makes it illegal for newspapers to criticize the president or Congress and impose fines and prisoners for editors who violated the law. So there you go. What was the case Marbury versus Madison, Mina? That is that very, very important case, right? Where James Madison basically, I think it's. I mean, I don't know if you need to know the exact things. And where are you? Aren't you a little bit further? Obviously not. I'm trying to find out where it is. But the Marbury versus Madison case is basically where this Marbury, I think it's Marbury, was a guy who didn't receive basically a hearing in Congress to become a Supreme Court judge. So he sued the United States government and basically the presidency and said that they did not offer what they should have done. And this guy, John Marshall, who is going to be super, super important, obviously, who is the Supreme Court for a long time and is a federalist and increases the power of the federal government, will say this: you don't have the right to go ahead and have that. And since we're saying that you don't have the right according to the Constitution, I'm going to create this brand new rule that's going to make the Supreme Court super, super important, called judicial review. And I would say write that throne 3 times. Judicial review. If you ever heard Marbury versus Madison, judicial review, judicial review, judicial review. And judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court to take out, to review any type of law that is made to figure out what's constitutional or unconstitutional. And you're asking, well, what did they do for 8 to 9 years before this? They probably decided on important cases regarding things that appealed. So let's say that you wanted to sue me because I drove over your lawn and ruined your lawn. Well, then it went to a court, and let's say we appealed that. So they're probably dealing with some, probably some big time issues, but issues like that. But this guy really says, John Marshall says, that's the power of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will continue to use that as a way to check the power of the Congress and the executive if they make laws that they believe are unconstitutional, which is a massive check right now. And I don't understand how Madison would have ever allowed a Supreme Court that didn't have that some kind of check or power over it. But he's the first one. John Marshall, although that power might have been there, might have been maybe implied, he really makes it clear that that is the job of the judicial branches, to check these individuals through a power called judicial review. Before that, that power wasn't there. All right, I see page 115 and 117. So I'm talking about the Alien Sedition Acts, I'm assuming. 115, difference between the parties in Washington's farewell address. That has nothing to do with Marbury versus Madison. But again, I want to say that's obviously in the next one. So I see John Marshall there. So that's really on period 4, Mina, I think. But let me see, and we'll double check. And we'll talk about that then. Yeah, that's really period 4. So I'll take care of that tomorrow, Mina. And if you can't make tomorrow's review, come to me during lunch, and I'll tell you in a couple minutes with the Marbury versus Madison. I'm really focused on period 3. Why Washington want the United States to stay out of foreign affairs? France. Let's go back to the farewell address. It's going to be so super important. He says this: not to get involved in European affairs. I mean, I don't know. Europe just seems like a mess, man. You don't know who's going to win, who's going to come on top. They all seem to be killing each other, and even the ones that aren't killing each other, they're literally killing each other, I guess, in civil war. The French are going wacky on the inside. All up Europe is going to bust out into multiple revolutions after the French Revolution that still continue on today, if you want to really look at it. So that's why keep away from Europe, man. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and cost you a lot of blood, and cost you a lot of time. Did the Alien Act ban all immigrants from entering the United States? No, it didn't ban them, right? Again, even though it's called the Alien Act, it wasn't banning. We're still allowing immigrants. We still need people to come over and, to make this country, one thing about population, guys, and this is why China got rid of it. You want your population as high as possible, even if it might cost the earth everything it is, because the more people you may have, the more taxes they pay, the more taxes you pay, the better off your government's going to be. You look at any country that has a flat population or declining population, you got a problem. A lot of the countries that people are fleeing from, let's say Syria, you got a massive problem. People are running out of that country all over the place. You look at Japan. Japan really has like a flatlined issue, or even like a subpar one, where they don't have as many children as they used to, and therefore your tax base, because these older people, they need medicine, they need Social Security, they have all these things that we promised since the New Deal. And that's a massive issue. So I'm just going to give you a heads up. Just always something to think about is we're always wanting to encourage immigration. Despite what our current president is saying, all economics would say this: President, you need to encourage immigration. You need to have immigrants come in here because that will build your tax base. You got more young people buying homes and having jobs and going to college and paying their taxes. Those taxes can ultimately support people. If you talk to Procopio about this, he'll say it's a Ponzi scheme. That's kind of what it is. God forbid we have less people and we have more people up here that aren't going to work, aren't paying taxes, and actually taking money from healthcare. Because guess what? Old people need a lot more money for healthcare than young people. You guys only visit the doctor when you get hurt or feel sick. Other people have to visit there. When you get older, you might have to visit there weekly, monthly to go get certain meds. And some of you guys have elderly that believe and are in that. So just as a heads up, when we talk about population, we never want to ban immigrants. So going back to Alien Sedition Acts 117, again, all it is it changes the amount of years from 5 to 14 years for immigrants to become a U.S. citizen. And also they can get rid of aliens if they're a bit of a threat towards the United States. It has nothing to do with stopping, right? Those immigration laws aren't going to be there, right, until the basically 1910s, 1920s. A little bit the 1890s with the Chinese Exclusion Act and some other ones on Catholics and, especially the Italians that are coming over. So we'll have those immigration, but really well past after the Civil War, we're encouraging immigrants to come over. Now, the immigrant experience might not be so fun, but it's not like we're putting up roadblocks to stop people. We're not putting up walls or gates or, issues, right? The story is Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, not the story of like stopping them. That still is, even after the 1810s and 1820s, it's still a story, right? The 1840s and 50s, we just get waves of different immigrants, right? First, they were British and French, and then it became Eastern Europeans, and then Asians when the Pacific showed up. Now we have Middle Eastern and African immigrants that are coming in. Not to say that Europeans aren't still not coming in, right? A lot of people want to live in a place called America. So, did not ban them. Can we go back to the Pinckney Treaty and explain what was that? Thank you, Hendrine, for the page number 112. Pinckney Treaty was basically to get an issue with Spain, I think it was, yeah. So, really, if you want to look at 1795, that was what it does, right? It basically gets all that land north. And you say, well, what about Louisiana? That's still under French territory. Right, we're going to get that later in the Louisiana Purchase under Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is not yet elected. So this is basically to make sure that the Florida boundary dispute is clear. So Florida is still part of, I believe it is, Westminster, New Orleans, Spain for the cities claimed Florida's north should be at the 31st, not north. So awesome. So Florida is still part of Spain. Florida is not part of the United States. That area, 31st parallel, that's going to be the borderline for Florida. And above that is going to be ours. It's going to be in the Mississippi Territory. And also, although, remember at this time, like, I don't know, it's even though it's Spain, right? Isn't it French? The New Orleans is French. The U.S. Minister of Spain agreed to loan the Pacific and New Orleans to American trade. Now, this is that time in European politics where, like, Napoleon's about to go wacko and he owns everything. So at this time, he gets New Orleans. So they get the port of New Orleans. Remember, this is going to be issued, though, in the next war, right? There's going to be some other war that's going to happen. I know it's not the War of 1812. I know they're going to go fight there. I know Andrew Jackson's going to fight there. But that's going to be an issue because New Orleans, basically, they have the right to use to go in and out of New Orleans without any taxes. And somebody's going to come up and put some tax on there. But we'll get there when we get to period 4. Aisha, Shays Rebellion. So Daniel Shays, can you give me a page number again? I know it's Daniel Shays, I'm pretty sure. What's the other one? So, yeah, that's the army guy, right? And I think it's for taxes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, let's just have me do this for about 20 minutes. Once again, guys, try to give me those page numbers right after. And you're like, I'm typing it, it just doesn't show up that fast. All right, let me go look at this. Daniel Shays, I think is the war veteran. So basically, there's a bunch of taxes that are being placed by the Federalists, and these guys, this Daniel Shays is a Revolutionary War veteran. He gets a bunch of these pissed off farmers who are going into debt, can't find loans, can't find easy money, and they start like a rebellion. And this is, no, that's the Whiskey Rebellion. But they start rebellion, and that rebellion probably gets put down. But I don't know because it's way too much for me to remember. But I need a chance to look at. Shays Rebellion 93. Thank you. Didn't he kill a big leader? I don't think any of these rebellions are ever successful. 93. In the summer of 1786, Captain Daniel Shays, a Massachusetts farmer and Revolutionary War veteran, led other farmers in an uprising against high taxes, imprisonment for debt, so they're going to jail because the taxes are putting them in debt, and the lack of paper money, easy loans and low interest rates, right? The rebel farmers stopped the collection of taxes and forced the closing of debtors' courts. So they basically went to the tax collector and said, "You're not coming over." And they're like, "No, we got to." And they're like, "Dude, we will do something to you." I don't know what they threatened, but they stopped it from happening. And then all the courts that would have put them into jail for debt, those were all closed. In January 1787, when Shays and his followers attempted to seize weapons from the Springfield Armory, the state militia of Massachusetts broke Shays' rebellion. Yeah, and I remember that, going back, that's why it says the problems of the articles. Going back, I totally remember talking about why Shays was so important because, it's an economic and political issue. Everybody's waiting for somebody to put down Shay, and nobody does. It's not when the state militia finally gets its own troops and basically puts it down. And everybody's looking at Washington. And when I say Washington, it's actually Philadelphia at this time, which is our capital. And I meant to say Washington, D.C. But everybody's looking at Philadelphia at this time under the Articles of Confederation going, dude, where's the army? They're like, we don't have an army. Like, why do you have an army? Like, we can't collect taxes. You guys told us in the Articles of Confederation, basically, we can't do anything. So I know there was a problem. I know there wasn't any issues. But basically, we don't have even the support to create an army. So why are you telling us to get involved when we don't even have anything? And so Massachusetts goes, "Oh, geez, really? You guys don't even have a freaking army? You guys, Philadelphia, get your crap together." And they get a bunch of people like, "Hey, we got to make sure these people collect taxes, or else these people won't be going to school. We're not going to have all these issues." So they get their own Massachusetts army to break up a rebellion led by Massachusetts farmers and also this guy Daniel Shay. So he's a Massachusetts farmer. All in Massachusetts. Why do I say that? Boston is in what city? Massachusetts. If you ever met a Boston fan, those people are crazy. Whether it be the New England Patriots or the Boston Penguins or the Boston Red Sox, Mr. Seuss is a Boston fan. Talk to him. You'll figure it out. Really cool guy, but really crazy when it comes to sports. Yeah, Malad. So this is broken up. That means that they were definitely put down. All right, guys. 59 minutes theoretically, a couple minutes past my stop time. Any last questions? New England is full of racist people. Interesting a lot. Why? Because they're farmers? I just don't even get it. Could you go over the Jay Treaty of 111? Sure. Let's go over the good old Jay Treaty of 111. Thank you, Andreen, for a page number. Jay Treaty, Washington Chief Justice John Jay, Special Mention Brain Call, Offensive Practice, Search and Siege, Made Shifts, Press Seaman, after negotiation of a treaty, which agreed to back his defense, but if the treaty was never in the Caesars, they ratified to state it. Yeah, so during this time, remember, there's the French Revolution, and the British are basically have destroyed the French, navy, and France doesn't have one, and the British, for the most part, but the French were doing it as well as pirates. We're basically capturing ships, saying that everything on this is ours, including the ship, and basically all the crew. They are now British soldiers, right? The impressment of British soldiers, I mean, of Americans into British soldiers. So the Jay Treaty was an opportunity, hopefully, to end that issue. It sounds like nothing ever happened, but they agreed to leave their western fronts, basically opening us to do that. It got kind of narrowly ratified by the Senate, the same Senate that, not the same Senate at the same time, but again, the Senate having the power to approve treaties. That's why they're going to deny the Treaty of Versailles. However, this angers Americans because basically Great Britain has the right to continue taking ships illegally, impressing our men, turning them into sailors, into British sailors. New England was still controlled by the British, right? Jesus saying, at what point, brother? When it was under the British, it wasn't, but after the American Revolution, it was owned by Americans, and New England is what we call the Northeast. And who's in the Northeast? A bunch of Federalists. Cool. I like how me and Emilad are starting to fight. That's awesome. Yeah, Emilad, I just if you can clarify later by what you mean by racist people, and then I'll always make the argument that we're naturally racist. It's part of our genetics. It's part of our biology. If you look at the brain, it knows make shortcuts, and so we quickly analyze people and things and make quick judgments about them without even thinking, because that's what our brain likes to do. It does not like to waste time. We're supposed to be efficient human beings. Well, at least we're designed to be, supposedly, according to biology. So a lot of psychologists have said that we are naturally racist. You had to know which clan you were in, which gang you were in, which country you were in, and you had to do that through very quick means, whether looking through a flag, looking at and this is true in medieval times. If it was like this, the top of a castle was like this meant one side. If it was squared off, it was another side. So there's all these different things. But anyways, yeah, I don't know. Was there slaves out at this time? For sure. Did they feel freaking, for the most part, that Indians were uncivilized savages? For the most part. Were there other people supporting them, like Bartolome de las Casas, and this critique of the devastation of the Indies and the encomienda system? Absolutely. Is everybody racist? I guess so, according to what I said, biology, but I think you guys I don't think you guys really understand the spectrum of racism. So, cool. I meant during the period when the Articles of Confederation were created. Well, during the Articles of Confederation, we have our independence. So New England would be owned by the United States, aka the Northeast, what we call Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Maine doesn't even exist at this time. New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, New Hampshire. I think I already said that. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, that area. It's the Northeast. Okie dokie. I think I'm out, kids. What is the big picture of period 3? Yeah, they're saying if you go back to that study guide, I'll walk you through it, but it's basically this. Oh, there it is. It's basically this. What is the French and Indian for? How did it cause the different acts that led to what we call the American Revolution? What were the different types of government during the American Revolution? Oh, sorry, Mina. I see where you see Marbury versus Madison, and Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, even though it's a period 4 case. So, I don't know. I'll probably let me go ahead and copy this. I'm going to actually take this out, and I'm going to move it down to John Marshall for you. I'll put a colon because really that's what John Marshall's led up to. So there you go. Okay, so I changed that. So then the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and lastly, Washington acting like a Federalist, both in the Whiskey Rebellion and also in his farewell address, kind of focusing on the United States. So there's a big picture. All right, 9:06. I'm going to stop. I'm sorry, Milad. We can go back to that another day, or I'll talk to you in class. So, all right, guys. Later for period 3. We'll see you tomorrow. Period 3. We'll see you. Period 4. Excuse me. We'll see you Wednesday. Yep. No worries. No worries, Aisha. Tacos for life. I really don't like tacos. I like burritos. No worries, Hendrine. Glad you guys made it. Looks like we only had about 5 or 6 of us today, but you guys were here. So, oh yeah, oops. No worries. All right, guys. Oh, sure. Now Hector shows up. Oh, 13 of us. Cool. Right on. I think these things will help, guys. I think this will help you guys with the multiple choice. I think it's going to help you with the LAQ and the short answer. I think obviously that's a holding test, so other than DBQ, which we talked about today. I'll give you some individual help. So, yeah, no worries. Thank you guys for dealing with an hour. Come with some questions, trying to figure it out. Cool. Yes, I know but tacos are usually hard shelled, and I don't like hard shell tacos. I like soft things. Even when I go to Taco Bell, I ask for them in the soft taco, not a hard shell taco. So that's why, Hillary. Jeez. Plus, pupusas are much better, anyways, which is actually a tortilla with meat in it. Yeah, Taco Bell occasionally, Hector. It happens. I know you guys don't have that. You guys don't have taco shops, but occasionally over here in Claremont Mesa, we have these things called Taco Bells that I get very rarely on my way home because once in a while I gotta get chalupa and the Skittles freeze. All right, I'm out of here. You guys have a good one. Peace.